So you're new to Gypsy Jazz and you don't know where to start. In this video, I'll share the 3 tunes that I think are the best ones to start with if you're absolutely beginning with Gypsy Jazz. And no, it's not minor swing. There's nothing wrong with minor swing, but I think these 3 tunes will really ease your way into the Gypsy Jazz technique, the rest strokes and the down strokes, and at the same time, they will be fun to play. I'm Dario Napoli, 20-year touring and recording artist, founder of the Under the Tuscan Sun Gypsy Jazz Camp, as well as author of Gypsy Jazz Guitar Mastery, and a lot of other stuff that I won't bore you with here. So let's dive right into it. Tune number 1. Stockholm. Now the 3 tunes I picked are not the best known or most played tunes in Gypsy Jazz jams and circles, which is a big mystery to me because they're not super complicated tunes and they're just fun to play. So as you can see, this first riff on Stockholm is quite a basic, simple phrase. And again, so it's nothing but a root, a fifth, and another root, an octave higher. So nothing complicated. But what this riff allows us to do is to work on downstrokes on separate strings. Just a quick recap. In Gypsy Jazz, generally, it's not an absolute rule, but generally every string change is a downstroke in terms of the right hand picking. And anytime you can execute a downstroke, it's preferable because you will get that color of sound and a bit of a bigger sound. So in this case, I'll be playing A flat, E flat, and then A flat again. And I want to make sure that whether I'm going down or coming back up, I will be always downstroking. So essentially every note is a downstroke. Now with that downstroke, I want to make sure that I also rest stroke, which is the other characteristic of Gypsy Jazz picking, so to speak. Rest stroke is simply I will pick one string, but my pick will then rest, as per the term, on the string below. This adds that specific color to the sound, the snap of the pick through one string, which then lands on the string below, creates a bit more of a clearer sound, a more defined sound, and a bit more presence. So that's why rest strokes and downstrokes. One time, Fapi Lafertin told me to think of my right hand as a whip. And so I always have that visual in mind when I play single notes and rhythm, that my right hand is a whip and that the action of the wrist ends where that string below is. In this case, I pick the E string, and the A string is where my pick rests. But on each of these individual pick notes, I want to then, for every single one of them, accentuate a little bit my whip motion. That way I will generate the sound not through the energy and force of my elbow and shoulder, but I will delegate everything to a loose wrist, which allows the hand to simply fall on the strings. Now, tune number 2 is Swing de Paris. Swing de Paris is a cute little tune which is essentially a blues in C, which then goes to A major, but you can get into that tune on your own terms. What I care about is, again, that very first riff. Okay, so once again, all of our motions are going to be downstrokes except for one. Now, these are obviously general suggestions or what typically happens in Gypsy Jazz. Of course, you can then adapt it to your own technique of the moment, but typically, if you'd play this with a gypsy or with an accomplished Gypsy Jazz players, you would have all downstrokes except for this B note, which then leads to the C again. So all downstrokes and rest strokes, of course. But this B note would be an upstroke because that will facilitate then playing the C right after. Now, there will be many occasions in gypsy jazz where you'll have to play 2 downstrokes in a row on 2 adjacent strings. But when possible, it's good to end a phrase with an upstroke on a string to then have a downstroke on the next passage. So whenever possible, if my last note on this D string is an upstroke, that will make it easier for me to then play the C. Now the next upstroke in this passage, in this phrase, or lick, or call it however you will, is going to be the open A string that is then followed by the G. So once again here, I'm going to play a downstroke on C, an upstroke on A, which then will facilitate, again, same thing, the last note, which is a G, which will be a downstroke. So remember, since every time I change a string, we're typically expected to play a downstroke in this style, whenever possible, it's a good strategy to have the last note on a certain string be an upstroke, so that will facilitate or make it easier to play a note on a string above the one just played. So once again, nice and slowly. So I'll have down, 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 up, down, up, down. And finally, our third tune. It's very counterintuitive choice, but I still stick by it. It's appel indirect. Now, appel indirect is definitely a complicated tune, especially at the tempo Django plays it. But when we slow it down, we really see that it's a foundational phrase in Django's vocabulary and in Django's technique. Because essentially, we're using a C major 6 triad, or actually, well, it's a 4-note chord, right? So it's the triad plus the 6. And all I'm doing is playing approach notes to the chord notes. If the chord notes are G, C, and E, and then of course the 6th is going to be the A. And I'm just going to be playing an approach note for each of those. Now you can decide to add the diminished run at the end, but I think if you're just starting out, I would just focus on this sequence of the notes of the chord. The diminished run at the end would be the following. You can play it using 2 fingers like Django, or add your 3rd finger for the high notes, whichever is more comfortable. But this is a great exercise and a great warm-up to really synchronize right and left hand, and to really gradually increase your speed and comfort with downstrokes and rest strokes. Really focus on having no gaps in the sound. In other words, really picking when you're pressing. And again, be aware of the tension in your right hand. You never want to feel too much tension in your right hand. You want to delegate everything to a wrist. Just like, as we said, if you have a whip in your hand, your pick is the tip of the whip and will be what generates the actual sound. So remember, this technique is really designed for the least amount of effort and strain and the maximum amount of sound. So always try to really be aware of the tension that you might have and release it. Always release it to your wrist. And of course, always fall on that string below. Of course, when you hit the E string, you'll have nowhere to fall, although at times the pick might hit the soundboard here. But on every other string, really look for that string below to limit the motion of your picking. So let me know in the comments below if you have any other tunes that you think might be the best to start with. And of course, if you have any questions or any other comments, feel free to leave them below. I love to discuss and interact with everyone. So let me know your thoughts. I hope this video is helpful to you. Please remember, in the description below, I have several links that might be useful. The first one is to my new book, Gypsy Jazz Guitar Mastery, where we'll go through a lot of these details, foundational details in the technique that Django Reinhardt used. There's also my link to the free weekly transcriptions. And don't forget, Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Italian time, I host my weekly Zoom where I answer questions and we get into all kinds of musical conversations with my students. So that link is also below in the description. All the best in your Gypsy Jazz journey. Never hesitate to reach out, and we'll see you in the next video.